Happy Wednesday, everyone. My name is Yiling Zhuang. I'm the Water Resources Regional Specialized Agent in University of Florida IFAS Extension for Central Florida. Welcome to the Water Wednesday. Water Wednesday is a webinar series about Florida's precious resource, water. Every Wednesday afternoon at 2 o'clock Eastern Time, we live stream a 30-minute talk about Florida's water and what we can do to protect it. We host our webinar series on Zoom and broadcast to Facebook Live. So please put in the chat box and tell us where you are watching this webinar. If you are viewing it on Facebook, please be aware of scammers. This webinar series is free. Please do not click any links that are not posted by the admin. We have a theme for every month, and May is the American Wetland Month. So we will focus our Water Wednesday on wetlands this month. And our first talk is about Florida's wetland. And our guest speaker is Dr. Jennifer Mitchell. She is the public communication coordinator with the St. Johns River Water Management District. Now let's welcome Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Yelin. I am excited to be here and give a little bit of information about Florida's wetlands, some of the different types of wetlands here in Florida, what makes a wetland, and what you can help do to protect those wetlands and how important those are. I first want to start out with a little bit of an overview of who I am and who the St. Johns River Water Management District is and what we do. So we are one of the 5 water management districts within the state, and we are one of the state agencies that is responsible for protecting some of the 11 million acres that are within Florida, acres of wetlands that are within Florida. Some of the ways that we go through this is for protecting these properties by purchasing them. And so I am going to talk about a few of our properties. So these are places that you can get out and explore those wetlands, maybe get to know them a little bit better, get to love them, understand what makes them a wetland. And I'll talk a little bit about how we've had these changes in perceptions and use of wetlands. It is our mission to ensure that we have enough water for us and our natural systems. And we do this through our 4 core missions, and those are water supply, flood protection, water quality, and natural systems. And so wetlands are the best example of an ecosystem that helps us accomplish these. And as I go through my presentation today, I think you'll understand why wetlands are so important to help us accomplish our missions and how they do help us to do all 4 of these things all at once. So if we look at Florida, it is a state that is surrounded on all sides by water. When we hear the term wetlands, we probably are going to think of water. And so it is a unique balance of water, plants, and soils. And we'll talk about how you can identify those unique things that are found in wetlands. But across our state, we have a relatively flat state that has over 11 million acres of wetlands. Over the past history of our state, though, about half of the historic wetlands have been lost due to drainage for agricultural practices. Some of the presentation at the end will actually talk about some of the restoration work that we've done in both Lake Apopka as well as the upper basin of the St. Johns River to restore those wetland areas that have historically been utilized for agriculture. I have these images up just to remind us about a little bit of that variety of wetlands that we do have within our state. I would love it, as we're going through some of these images in just a second, if you can start thinking, what does wetland mean to you? What do you think of when you hear the term wetland? So put that in the chat and let me know, what is it that you think about when you hear wetland? Depending on where you live within the state or where you might even be living within the country, you might have a different opinion of what a wetland looks like. So potentially you think of the vast expanses of freshwater marshes, like in the upper basin of the St. Johns River, where we get a network of sawgrass marsh, as well as some of those cypress stones, as in that picture on the left. And these marshes are going to be different from swamps that we'll see in just a little bit, in that marshes typically don't have an abundance of trees. So we see here, there are a couple of trees here and there, but they're dominated by herbaceous vegetation. Maybe you think about the importance that wetlands play in terms of the animals that live in wetlands and how wetlands are able to help meet their needs. Or maybe you think of the bottomland forests, riverine floodplain dominated by cypress, black gum, and other trees that are adapted to live in these soils that are inundated by water. If we think about these unique characteristics and unique conditions, not all plants can handle their feet or their roots being flooded for long durations. And so these plants have special adaptations to be able to survive in soils that are saturated or flooded, as well as in standing water in some of the cases. So we can see in these two pictures how there is standing water within these wetlands. Or maybe you're more in a coastal area and you think about these unique wetlands that occur where there's salt water. So those saltwater marshes maybe are mangrove forests. So those, as there is climate change, we are seeing that mangroves are moving further north. So maybe it's those mangroves and their fantastic buffering capacities that these saltwater marshes and mangroves have in helping with that storm surge. Or maybe it's the interactions that each one of us get to have within these wetlands. These wetlands are just a few of examples of people out recreating, thinking about ways that we can connect with wetlands and how important it is to understand what is around you so that you do start to love it, want to protect it, and ensure its survival into the future, are just a few of the ways that we can think about how important they are and how we can have positive impacts. Or maybe it's the dynamic nature of a wetland. If you are out and in wetlands very often, you might notice that there are periods where they are saturated or they have standing water, and there may be periods of dry conditions. So a wetland does not have to have standing water in it all of the time. So this image is one that I've stitched together of the same isolated wetland down in some cattle ranches down in Okeechobee, where we had dry conditions in the spring. And then as those summer rains that we get here in Florida started up, it would have about 3 feet of standing water within that wetland. So what is required for a wetland to be considered a wetland? There are 3 things that a wetland has to have. Those are going to be hydric soils. So those are soils that are indicative of water presence. So this can be gray soils like we can see in this picture here. It can be, as you move even out of Florida, it can be areas where you have differences in color within the soils, indicating that there are roots of those wetland plants which are oxygenating small areas right around the root zone of those plants. You have to have hydrophytes, so you have to have plants that love water. That's what hydrophytes are. And you have to have the right hydrology. So if you don't have water in your wetland when you're out there, you have to have indication, so either the plants or the soils, that lets you know that wetlands, that water is present there for a long enough period to be considered a wetland. And then those natural environments that are considered wetlands are really important places for plants and animals, and many different birds, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, insects require wetlands to feed, reproduce, and rear their young, and just survive. And about 45% of those species that require wetlands are becoming rare and endangered. So it is really important to think about how important it is to protect some of these wetland ecosystems. This graphic shows us a little bit about the different ecoregions here in Florida. And so those ecoregions are going to let us know a little bit about what type of ecosystems are going to be there. These ecosystems are going to be created because of interactions between the soils, the climate, the hydrology, so how that water, where that water level is within those soils, as well as the topography, or how high from the water table those areas are. And so all of those things will combine to have some species be able to survive in that area and others not be able to do as well. And so we can see, when we think about the state as a whole, that there are different areas that we're going to see different types of species be able to thrive and survive and really grow. And then when we start zooming in on the smaller levels of ecosystems, we have other fluctuations that can really indicate or can be influenced by water levels. So in this graphic, we can see that coastal wetlands can run the whole gamut of having herbaceous materials or herbaceous plants, all the way into some of these wetland tree species that are able to survive, or scrubby species. And then as you move into open water, those are not going to be wetlands. Those are going to be more of your lake ecosystems. And then as you move away where the plants are not getting flooded and the soils are not indicative of flooding, then you're going to be considered in an upland. So those trees like it high and dry. And that is a nice ecotone, or a barrier, or a dividing factor between those wetland systems where plants and the soils are really going to exhibit the fact that there is water there frequently. And then in the upland, it's going to be much drier. And so we can see with this little graphic how some very small changes in elevation will give way to a very different type of species that will start growing and persisting in those areas. And so, as I mentioned, we currently have around 11 million acres of wetlands. And historically, there were about double that. And that is because here in Florida, there was a historic perception that wetlands, that these areas were only beneficial when they could be drained and farmed. And so we can see in those pictures, the black and white pictures, some folks cutting down cypress and some dredging activities to dry some of this land. And now we're having a shift in how important utilizing and restoring wetlands can be in terms of water quality, flood control, water supply, all of these different aspects that we didn't understand in the past, and we didn't see how beneficial they could be. So just one example of how we've had shifts in perception is the Seminole Ranch property conservation area the district owns. This is a floodplain wetland. And so depending on the water level within the St. Johns River, you can see the picture on the far left is a dry picture. So it hasn't rained, but there you can see that the river is going through the middle of it there. But as water levels come up and that those floodwaters go out into this property is able to store over 127,000 acre feet of water without any pumps, levees, or other infrastructure, all because of the topography of this area. And that flooding that occurs in these floodplain wetlands helps to maintain the plant species that are going to occur in these floodplains, as well as it deposits nutrients on those floodplains that can really help those ecosystems be really productive areas. And so I did mention how the district owns and maintains over 700,000 acres of property. And one of the reasons that we own these properties is their typically their proximity to lakes, rivers, or other areas of important wetland value. And so this is a map that shows our district properties and where those are located. Our website, sjrwmd.com, is one of the best places to go to find out information about which properties are open, if there are some big projects going on out at our district properties, as well as what you can do on each of these different properties in our district. I'm going to talk about 4 of our properties and some of the wetlands that are on those properties, and we'll go from the south portion of our district all the way up, kind of the way the St. Johns River flows. So the first property is Fort Drum Marsh Conservation Area. And this conservation area, as you can see, it has some really fabulous boardwalks, opportunities for getting out and enjoying these wetlands, learning about them, observing them, thinking about how cool they are, because that's my favorite thing to do in a wetland. But this property is a mosaic of wetland and upland communities, with the marsh areas representing the southernmost reaches of the St. Johns River headwaters. And so in just a little bit, I'm going to talk about the upper St. Johns River Restoration Project. And so this is going to be one of the furthest south pieces of property that is a part of that. And when we purchased this, the goals of owning it and purchasing it and restoring it and owning it as a conservation area are to improve water quality, because wetlands act as the kidneys to our ecosystems, to help to reduce those freshwater discharges from the Indian River Lagoon, to allow them to go into the St. Johns River. Again, that shift in perception of getting water off of the landscape as quickly as possible. Historically, water would get pumped to the Indian River Lagoon, and now we are trying to maintain it to go through the St. Johns River. It provides water for water supply, so allowing that water to move more slowly through these wetlands, and it's going to help to restore and enhance wetlands. This boardwalk that we can see here does go through some blackwater hardwood swamps, and so it's a great place to enjoy. Even on a warm day, you might need to make sure you take your bug spray, but the sunlight is muted by the cover of the very dense cypress and cedar trees, as well as sable palms. And the communities that do occur on this property are dry prairie, pine flatwoods, hardwood swamps, and freshwater marsh as well. Our next property, as we move further north, is Buck Lake. It is the furthest north of our properties that are in that St. Johns River Restoration Project that I will talk about. It has a really fabulous observation tower, and it is one of the most diverse in terms of the different ecosystems of our properties in the southern region. And so there are even some relic salt marshes on this property from when sea level was much higher in the past. And so there are some really unique ecosystems that occur here at Buck Lake. Moving further north, Dunn's Creek is one of our properties, and multiple of our properties are similar to Dunn's Creek in that they protect the watershed around some of our smaller tributaries that flow into the St. Johns River. And so the Dunn's Creek property is a large floodplain area along Dunn's Creek, and it provides the opportunity for water storage. So anytime we have these floodplain properties, they're going to help with that protection of flooding, because they're allowing that water to overflow the banks as they should, and slowly move into the soils and then back out into the river. And so that's going to be a really important aspect of these systems and why the district owns them, as well as that filtering capacity that wetlands do have. At Dunn's Creek, there are lots of pine flatwoods, upland mixed forests, and small strands of swamps, of cypress domes and cypress strands as well. And then over towards the eastern portion of our district, Lake Lochloosa, Lochloosa Wildlife Conservation Area is on Lake Lochloosa, and it is one of the areas that is providing floodplain swamp. It has lots of hydric hammocks, and it provides lots of opportunity to get out and recreate, as well as a restoration area within this beautiful area around the lake. And then one of our last properties that I'm going to talk about is one that we're working on restoration at this property as well. And so the Lake Apopka North Shore, as you can see here in the green at the top, there are lots of levees where you are able to recreate. The North Shore Wildlife Drive is one of the most visited properties of our district, because you can take people there on weekends to see wildlife, and it is the #1 birding location within the state. But historically, Lake Apopka has had really poor water quality because of the agricultural practices that have gone on in the past. And so the district has been working with restoration through multiple different techniques. So we've done some rough fish harvesting. The Marsh Flowway is what I'm going to talk about, because that is a created wetland that is utilizing those properties that wetlands have to remove phosphorus and those sediments from the ecosystem. And then there has also been some vegetation planting within the lake as well. So the Marsh Flowway we can see here, it is a treatment wetland that began operating in 2003, and it treats about 40% of the lake volume annually. That water is going to flow out into the Beauclair Canal, and some of it, depending on how that water is being managed, will either flow through the Beauclair Canal or back out into Lake Apopka. And you can see that that water going into the wetlands is cloudy, has higher phosphorus concentrations, and as it flows through these wetlands, those soils and the plants are going to, and the thyme is going to allow that phosphorus to fall out of suspension, especially the particulate phosphorus that's hung onto the side of those particles, and the water that comes out is then much cleaner. Wetlands are, I know there's going to be a future webinar about treatment wetlands, and so this will just give you a little taste about how powerful wetlands are as water cleaners. And so ultimately, when we think about how reducing the amount of phosphorus that is in this lake, how it's able to have this cascading effect, we can see in this little graphic that even through just or through reducing the phosphorus through that flowway, through other processes that are going on over at Lake Apopka, that more light is able to reach the bottom of the lake. That has been allowing more submerged aquatic vegetation to grow, and that then allows those soils at the bottom of the lake to stay in place, and it provides increased habitat for sports fish, and it holds those sediments in place. And then finally, I'm going to quickly go through the upper basin restoration, mostly because I want you to see some of the impressive work that's been done. This project has been going on since the mid-1980s, But just to give you a little perspective, in the 1900s, the upper basin would have all been historic floodplain with the ditching and draining and agricultural that moved into the area. You can see that a majority of the basin was impacted wetland. And then as we move into 2003 and into the current, we see that those restoration efforts are really doing a great job of reestablishing the marsh in these upper basins, in the upper basin. But how did we go from cattle pasture to a wetland system? So first we had to remove the agricultural infrastructure. So those levees that were created, the old fences and culverts, and fill up those ways that the water was getting transported prior when it was functioning as a agricultural operation. As we are working to remove those, the ultimate goal is to restore the hydrology. So by doing all of that, we're helping to create the landscape so that that hydrology will be able to return. As we are transitioning from grazing and cattle grasses, we had to get the native plants that can handle that flooding to get those in as well. And so we had to establish those native wetland plants. So some of that was done through allowing the seed bank that was in the soil to just come back. Some of that was done through planting. So we can see a planter, a special adapted planter going along planting that sawgrass. And then we also had folks out hand planting some of that spike rush. And then the last phase was that reestablishing the hydrology. So removing that exterior levee at this property. And after that exterior levee was removed, within about 4 months and lots of rainfall, we were able to see the reestablishment of this hydrology and the wetland rebound. This project has received a tremendous number of accolades and awards for the Upper St. Johns River Basin Restoration Project. It was awarded the Thies International River Prize back in 2018. It was in 2016, it was given the Project of the Century by the Florida Engineering Society. And in 2016, it was a game changer for citrus growers because of the availability of water that could be utilized for flood protection and irrigation. So now that you've seen some of the ways that restoration and natural wetlands are able to function and how important they are to our economy, to the natural resources, to the plants and animals that live within them, as well as the opportunities for recreation. Maybe you're asking yourself, well, what can I do for some wetlands? What can I do to help these wetlands? And I challenge you to think about your connection to wetlands. How close do you live? Where is your closest wetland? What do you consider a wetland? I know on my street in my neighborhood, there's a cute little wetland right next to my daughter's school. And so it's always nice to drive by that and see the cypress trees and think about the function that that wetland has in its location. But that proximity also means that the things that we do within our landscapes may make their way into the stormwater, and that stormwater is going to move either directly into nearby water bodies or through the underground connections. And so just remembering that all of our water is connected will help you think about your connection to wetlands. Making sure if you have a pet that you pick up their waste, if you have a septic system to make sure that it's maintained appropriately, and that you dispose of your trash appropriately. This is an example of some balloons that made their way out into one of our district properties and was found by some airboaters. And so I hope that you will get out and explore a wetland. My contact information is at the bottom there. And if you are interested in any information from the district, please feel free to let me know, and I'll take any questions now.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. So if you have any questions, you can put in the chat box. And I understand for Facebook, it has about 10 seconds delay. So for our Facebook viewers, we will start a question from Zoom first, and then we'll go back to Facebook. And a great presentation, Jennifer. I really love the last comment you made. It just everything is connected. We can always do our part.
Absolutely.
That's great. So I believe they're still typing your question. So I have a question here. Which wetland is that picture?
This is from the north shore of Lake Apopka.
Oh, okay.
So it's one of our most visited and photographed and birded properties.
Yeah, I see some very professional equipment.
Absolutely. If you want to have an opportunity to be wowed, I started following the Friends of the North Shore Wildlife Drive, and they post some incredible photographs.
Wow, great. Let me check our Facebook site. I see some comments. It's great presentation. Yes, it's very informative, and it's just so interesting to learn Florida's wetland.
And one last thing that I do want to promote is that if there are any people or teachers or people that have middle or high school children, we do have a grant program to help students get out and explore wetlands, explore our water resources, learn more about them. And that is opening up at the beginning of June. And so it's for middle or high school, public or charter classes to do water related projects. So feel free to email me if you are a educator that would like more information about that.
It's the same as the Blue School Grant Program?
Yes, that's what it is.
All right, I will post it on Facebook. So you can go check that webpage, and I will also get it on Facebook here. I mean, on Zoom here. Yeah, it's a great program. If you are K-12 teachers, don't miss this opportunity. All right, I think you cover all the basics of wetland.
Right.
So before I let everyone go, I do want to let you know for next week, we'll talk about constructed wetland. So here you heard a lot, it's a natural wetland and wetland restoration. So next week, I think Jennifer already touched a little, but next week we'll more focus on constructed wetlands. So something is like how can we build a wetland? And after that, it will be, again, Jennifer already touched a little bit on that because wetlands are the kidney of our the ecosystem. So the last topic of this month will be how to use wetland to treat water and how wetland be wetland as a tool for water treatment. So if you like our Water Wednesday series, you can find more information on Facebook. And if you want to interact with our speakers directly, you can register event, join us on Zoom. And with that, I thank Jennifer for your time, for your informative presentation, and also appreciate everyone tuning in this afternoon with us. And hope you have a wonderful Wednesday afternoon, and see you next Wednesday. Bye.